while I speak, that's probably great because you don't really, even though I'm on Skype and all that, you don't just want to hear me explain things. So I'd love, if there's anything not understood or if anyone just has questions as we go, that's really good. I've just got to make sure we can hear the question.
Yeah.
And of course, if you'd like to stop me and ask for clarification or something, I'm more than happy to do that.
Excellent.
So, but I'll start maybe just with talking about sort of how I write plays and how I got into it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because I think it might be helpful, because I'm sort of writing stuff at the same age as these students.
Yep.
So maybe I'll give you an idea how I started and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Dave, and I'm sort of a full-time playwright. I write a lot of plays, but I actually don't do that as my only thing. I also write a column in the newspaper, and I write television, and I also work for things like museums and stuff like that. And I think in the next year, given with all the COVID-19, I'll probably have very few plays performed because, of course, you need a theatre, and they often have more than 100 people in.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of things, but I've always sort of called myself a playwright as the main thing I do, or it's maybe what I'm best known for. How do you get started as a playwright? Well, I was thinking about that. When I was a kid, my grandmother belonged to a organisation called the Country Women's Institute. Has anyone heard of it? Down in Lincoln?
In Lincoln?
Yeah. Anyone know anything about it?
Emily?
I've heard of it, but I don't know.
No, just heard of it.
Okay, so she was like in the Country Women's Institute in 1936, I think it was, and she was a farmer's wife, and they used to do little things like petition the minister so that convicted criminals weren't put to work on farms in their town. They looked after other women who are often very isolated, so it was a rural women's organisation that was actually quite good in some ways. It did some really good things. And they used to get together in Wellington or in a big city once a year, and they used to perform plays. And it was totally amateur. My grandmother wrote a play. She was Scandinavian by descent, so her her father was part Swedish, part Norwegian, and her grandparents didn't speak English. And my great-grandmother learned to speak English by hiding in a ditch and listening to road workers speak. So she used to swear all the time because she didn't know you weren't meant to say that in English, but she'd learned her English from workers and stuff. So I found that really interesting. But Nana used to go to these conferences and write these little small plays. And one that I remember she showed me, it was about Scandinavians living in the bush up in the Wairarapa in the North Island, and children getting lost and things like that. So children would get lost in the bush and they'd die. That was it. So and the little cabins were these tiny log cabins. If you think of the thickest native bush in New Zealand, putting a little cabin and then a tiny little clearing outside the cabin, a bit like a Hansel and Gretel cabin, that's what they lived in. So I had quite vivid memories of my grandmother, and she wrote these little plays. And then, when I was a kid, like when I was 7 or 8, I really liked acting. And I was a terrible actor, but I liked acting. And so I used to make up little sketches. And she wrote one for me. And it was sort of a comedy sketch. And I performed it at the school assembly. And it was quite funny. And so after that, I just wrote these little plays. I wrote, one about slavery, one about Napoleon. Any topic really didn't matter. And I just wrote these little plays. And so that's sort of how I got started. And I went to these drama classes when I was about 13. I really only went to meet girls, to be honest. But my parents thought I was doing something good. And I didn't meet any girls. It was terrible. Well, I did meet girls, but they didn't like me. But it was actually really fun. And we used to make up stuff. And so we just made up. We never wrote plays, but we improvised, and we made up stories ourselves. and we'd sort of just come up with an idea. And we had a really good teacher, and he'd just say, he'd give us a topic or a theme, and it might have been things like peer pressure or stuff like that, and we'd say, well, what's peer pressure? And we make up a little play about it, and it was actually good not having a script in some way. But then after that, I still quite liked theatre, but I didn't really write much. And then when I was at school, I wrote a bit of non-fiction or satire, but not really any plays. And then I had a friend who was an actor, and we just used to get together and make up ideas that we thought were outrageous. And when he went to drama school to train as an actor, he and I used to write stuff. And we wrote a few comedy sketches and people laughed, so we thought we were onto something. And then most of my training was as a musician. So I played the trumpet and I was interested in playing in orchestras. And so I never really learned to write in a formal sense. I just studied music. And I found that music and theatre was so similar that I didn't really it was sort of the same thing. And so in the same way a symphony ends with lots of loud music, or a rock concert ends usually with a really loud anthem or something, I thought a play usually ends with all the players on stage and sort of a climax. And you need if you listen to a piece of music, an album or a symphony, you don't like fast, heavy music the whole time. It's quite nice having a slow movement. It's quite nice having a gentle piece. Well, it's the same in theatre. We like conflict and we like lots of stuff happening, but sometimes it's really nice having a quiet scene where two people just sort of talk. So I learned a lot about how to write from actually being a musician. And the other good part about being a musician is I used to get hired to play in musicals, in plays, and in operas. So to sit in the pit, that's where the musicians sit, and just watch how something would go and how a show would work or how it wouldn't work. And we always had live audiences, so I could hear the audience laugh at comedy, or I could hear different audiences react differently. And I could hear those moments where no one breathed because it was so tense on stage. So that was a really good sort of environment. So in terms of getting started, I just tended to write little sketches. And for those of you who have to write a one-act play or have to write a lot of scenes, my advice is just start, don't panic, and start with one scene. And you write what you like. Write a scene you want to see. So if you have a story, don't get freaked out by it, but just go, okay, what's a scene that could happen in the story? It doesn't matter if it's the last scene or the first scene or a middle scene. Just write a scene and sort of see what happens. Then go, okay, what could happen after this or what could happen before this? And that will be your next scene. And if you add a couple of things together and maybe write one or two more, you start having an act. And if you put a couple of acts together, that's how you have a play. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds really simple, but a lot of writers sort of freak out and go, oh my God, I have to write a whole play. How am I going to do that? Well, it's actually quite simple. You start very simply. Having said that, before I write a whole play, I think about what I want to say, and I think about how I want to do it. And I even think of, is this idea a play or not? Because there's some great ideas, but they don't always make great plays. Mm. I'll give you an example. If I watch Game of Thrones and get really inspired and go, I'm going to write a play about this amazing kingdom where there's this royal family with 12 daughters and 18 sons, and they're all incredibly ambitious. And they have this amazing gory fight where 5 of them get killed, and then along comes a prince from another kingdom and wants to overthrow it. Okay, my cast is about up to 50. I've got to get a fight coordinator, I've got to get makeup, and it's going to be a really hard thing to put on in a theatre. So that idea, I might save that for when someone asks me to write a big TV series or a big movie, which is probably never. However, I might go, and I'm just giving you an example, who's the worst family in the world that has to go into self-isolation, say with this COVID virus? So imagine, what would a family be like who all hated each other, who got on each other's nerves, and had to go into self-isolation? So I might do something like that, and I might go, okay, I'll make this family really dysfunctional. So I'll base it on my parents or my friends, and I'll write about them, and they'll never speak to me again. I'll make the father a bit like me, so he's always drinking coffee. He's just drinking coffee all day, and it really gets on his wife's nerves. And I'll make the wife a really social person, so she's on the phone or on Skype the whole time. Then I'll make the kids, I'll make one maybe the daughter really academic, so she's always trying to find stuff, but she's frustrated because she can't find what she wants on the internet and wants to go to the library but can't. And I'll make the dude, he's got a whole lot of friends and he's not allowed to see them, so life stops and he just thinks. And then we'll bring in some complications. The daughter's boyfriend is also in isolation, but he's getting really friendly with the next door neighbour who used to be the best friend of the daughter, but now she's not speaking to her because she thinks, and you start making up stuff like that. Now, could I write a play? Could I find an actor? Could I find 4 actors to play a father, a mother, a daughter, and a son? And could I find one room to put them all in a theatre? Well, yes, I could. It's really easy. And I could keep them going for at least an hour, because they'd all be good parts to play for the actors. So that's another thing I think we can get with writing, is your job when you're writing a play is to give actors stuff to do. So you want actors to go, wow, I'd really like to be in that person's play because they've written this fantastic character. She's really bright, she's a nice person, but she also gets incredibly jealous and paranoid. She thinks her dad's a bit of a dick. She quite likes her mum, but she gets pissed off when her mum steals her clothes, and you start getting some nice character stuff. And an actor loves that. An actor would love playing a part like that, rather than, I'm a prince who turns up in a big costume and gets stabbed. That's not a great part for an actor. So I talk about vertical and horizontal writing. And what I mean by that is vertical is what happens in the play as you go along, but horizontal is what happens to an actor and what happens to their world. And so when I write a play, I think vertically, I think what happens in this play. But then once I've written a draft maybe, I look at a play from each character's point of view. And if I write a play, say for 6 characters, I want every actor to be happy with their character, and I want them to be busy. And that's in a way the art of playwriting is keeping those characters interesting and busy. And it's quite hard because your actors disappear, and you write a great scene in which the son has an argument with his father, but then in the next 3 scenes he doesn't do anything, or he just comes in to borrow a book, or he does something. So that's not so good. So you've got to go, what can keep him busy in those middle scenes? So that's one of the challenges with writing a piece. Getting back to sort of why we write, or and I know why you guys write. You have to because you're doing the course. But why we write, if you like, in the real world, is usually because we had something to say. I think the best place is because we have something to say, or we just want to comment on something. And when I say you've got to have something to say, I don't mean the thing you have to say is something like climate change is bad, or we must wash our hands, or racism can be awful. Those things, while they might be true, I find in a play, you're all at school, so the thing you hate the most at school as an older person going, don't do this, don't do that, you can't do that, don't forget you have to do that. So why on earth would you want to then go to a play that does that? And so I hate plays that sort of tell people what to think. I'd rather plays make people think and just say something that's interesting. But what I hate with plays are plays that say, look at me, I'm clever, I'm a writer, or hey, I'm a good actor. So I like to think of plays not necessarily having a message, but having something to say about the world that might be a bit interesting. And I think it's also really important not to knock our audience over the head. In my experience, and this helped me when I was a teacher, if you're in a group of 30 people, and it doesn't matter if you're an adult, or if you're a student, or if you're an 8-year-old, or a 58-year-old, most people will be smarter than you. So as a playwright, I go, the audience as a collective group are smarter than me. So I don't think I don't write down. I try and make the audience work really hard. And if someone says to me, are you sure the audience will get that, what you're trying to say? Usually my answer is yes, they will, because they're smarter than me. And so it's very important not to write, I suppose, too simplistically. That doesn't mean you have to use big words. It just means you have to be careful that you're not over-explaining things. I wrote a play recently about 4 people that went to Gallipoli, went to Anzac commemoration, and there's a couple. There's a guy from New Zealand and a girl from Australia, and at the end of the play they sort of hook up. But at the very beginning, he's forgotten to bring a blanket, and she says, "You can use mine if you like." And they sort of just get a little bit closer together, and there's nothing in it. She just says, "Oh, you can borrow that." When we did that in front of a very educated adult audience, no one reacted. When we did it in front of a secondary school, everyone went, whoa, because they could pick up that by her just letting him share her blanket, she was basically, saying something to him. And so, audiences are really smart. And it was totally my intention for that to happen, but it was only the secondary school audience that actually picked it up. Because for some strange reason, you people are far more attuned to things like that than adults worrying about the mortgage or whatever, or whether their kids are going to turn up to school today or something like that. So that's sort of what I think about audiences. I'm just going to look at what I've got here. Are there any questions so far? Because I really like you to let me know what you think and what you're up to. And any questions about anything I've said?
Like I said, this is period 1. You're getting them at the most glowing. They're usually a lot more chippers than this. I have a question actually.
Yeah.
In terms of your preparation, you've talked a lot about a character that you have in mind or something you're trying to say. Do you ever consider location as one of those early things when you're writing?
Yes. I think when I'll just try and think of my own plays I've written to give you an example. Certainly the one that I wrote recently about the First World War was a perfect example of that, because I got asked to write a play about the First World War because it was 100 years since the commemoration. And I said to the person that asked me, I said, I'm sick of the First World War. I'm sick of all these commemorations. I'm sick of going to the theatre and seeing soldiers dressed up in uniform saying, "Mother, I'm going to help the Empire," and then Mother going, "Please don't go," and I've written that play before. So I said to the person that was wanting to commission me, I'm sort of over the First World War. And he said to me, well, maybe you could do something not about, about the First World War, but not set in 1914 or 15. And I got thinking and I thought, I want to write a play about today. And so I wrote a play about 4 young people who go to Gallipoli for a booze-up. They go to the Gallipoli commemoration because they want to hook up and get drunk, basically. definitely. Those were the things. But I talked to some people, and that's why a lot of people go to Gallipoli. And we all believe they go to pay respect to their ancestors, but I knew that wasn't always the case. So I created these 4 characters, and the whole play is set on the lawn at Gallipoli, and the whole intention of the 4 characters is to smuggle an alcohol and meet someone. And while they're there, one of the characters knows a lot about the First World War, and another one of the characters has a brother in Afghanistan. And so I was actually able to write a really serious play about World War I, but it was all set in contemporary, it was set in Turkey, but it was about New Zealanders and Australians. And it was really liberating not having to write to set it 100 years ago. But the setting, the location of Gallipoli made it a really good location for me. It was much better than setting it in New Zealand or Australia. And the other good thing is has anyone been to Gallipoli?
No.
No, nor have I. But what I do know is there's a lawn there. And there's a lawn where everyone sits. And it's absolutely packed with New Zealanders and Australians. It won't be this year, but usually it's packed with New Zealanders and Australians. And they sit really close to each other. And they usually have flags around their shoulders, and they talk to each other. You're not allowed alcohol, but quite a few smuggle it in. And it's become a place where young New Zealanders go on as part of their OE. So I was really interested in that. And of course, in the theatre, how do I write for 1,200 young people from around the world that are camping on the Gallipoli lawn? Well, you use your imagination. So I used the lawn. I just used the ground sheet, if you like, and I had my 4 actors sitting on it. But every time they moved, they had to say, "Oh, excuse me, can I get?" And so you believed by the way they were sitting that they were in a crowded lawn. And what's wonderful about theatre is that you can do that. If I stand on a stage and say to you people, "Hi, my name is Sulu. I'm 9 years old. I'm a Samoan girl that was born in New Zealand, but my parents are Samoan, and I'm really looking forward to Sunday school next week because I get to wear my special white dress, and my mother has taught me a song to sing." And now you guys are probably sitting looking at me now going, no, that's a middle-aged Pākehā dude, and he's not a 9-year-old Samoan girl. But the beauty of theatre is that if I do that for long enough and I do it well and it's a good script, you'll start believing me, and you'll start going, "I really hope that she remembers her lines for her song on Sunday, because if she doesn't, she might get in trouble." And so theatre's a place where we can pretend, and we know we're in a theatre. Our audience knows we're in a theatre. But you can do what you like in a theatre, and for some reason, we don't mind. So if I say, "Thank you for joining me, it's great to be here. Look, there's a few technical problems, but the spaceship will be leaving in about 12 minutes. First, we'll be going to Mars, so that'll be fine, but make sure that when we go to Jupiter, you've got your anti-gravity tablets." And I say something like that. If it's a decent play, you're going to believe me. You're going to pretend you're in a spaceship, and when the oxygen supply runs out, you're going to be hopefully as worried as I am. However, if I made a TV show or a movie and it wasn't realistic, if you said that's not a spaceship, that's just Dave in his office, then you wouldn't believe it. So what's great about theatre, and I don't know why, is that the less realistic players, the more we believe it. So you don't need, for example, the captain of the spaceship to have any equipment, but he can just go, "Holly Houston, can you read me?" And it's just a count. But we believe it because we're in a play, we're in a theatre. So plays can be realistic. There's a term, kitchen sink drama, meaning your set is exactly what you have. Your set is exactly what you have in a real house, say a kitchen sink. But you can make your play have any sort of set you like, and the more abstract it is, the more non-realistic it is, often the better, because you can do more things. And so I can hold up a pen. It can become a syringe. It can become all sorts of. It can become an earpiece. It can become a microphone. It can become all those things, and people, might believe it. It can become stripes for admiral in the Navy. We can do what we like. Theatre encourages imagination like that. In a way, I think sometimes film and movies don't. I meet people that work on big movies, and while they're great, they're often really bored because they're not being asked to use their imagination. They just have to, it's set in a spaceship, we have to make some Navy uniforms, or Air Force uniforms, or it's a big gothic Game of Thrones type thriller, so we have to give the princesses crowns and big long dresses. Whereas I love the way I saw a play 4 nights ago, and the whole set was just a clothesline, really, and to make the different locations, the actor, she just rearranged the pegs to make new spaces, and it was really good. What I'm talking about here is three-dimensional thinking. We live in a three-dimensional world, and yet people think playwrights sit at a computer and type. And actually, that's the last necessary thing we do, but it's not the most important. So if you and your friends sit somewhere in a cafe drinking milkshakes when you're meant to be in school, and you start having ideas and say, wouldn't it be funny if this happened? Wouldn't it be funny if that happened? Wouldn't it be amazing if that person met that person? Then that's actually playwriting. The coming home and writing it down is what happens afterwards. So if you write with another person, or if you have a friend that you both get on with, and you make each other laugh, or you make each other create good stories, that's probably the best situation you can be in terms of becoming a writer. If you look at a lot of our famous practitioners, a lot of our famous, certainly in comedy, and I'm thinking Flight of the Conchords, they're people who are friends that just got together over a cup of tea or something and just went, hey, what if? They're not serious people that sit down and say, I'm going to become a writer. So sometimes if you sit on a bus and you hear two people talking, and it's a really interesting conversation. Like I was meeting someone the other day, and I heard someone say, with this COVID thing, my son, he flats with 2 travel agents. So he's going to have to come back home because they're going to have to get fired, and he's going to give up his flat. And we're going to have him back home, but the trouble is he's really smelly. So I heard that story, and I went, there's a little play, that's funny, So often our inspiration for writing can come from a friend, or it can come from just what we hear. And I don't know if you've heard of Janet Frame, a wonderful novelist, New Zealand novelist, but she always said, I can afford to get a taxi wherever I go, but I always get a bus because it's more interesting. Hearing people on the bus is more interesting than just talking to a taxi driver. And so I agree that with getting ideas and stuff, it's really good if I'm creating characters or writing a play. I often just go and listen at places that I shouldn't really be, and to create characters. A question for you guys: if I said, let's say you want to write a play, and it's not autobiographical, it's about characters that aren't you. How do you write a character that's not you? How do you start? What would you do?
I'd connect it to someone else.
Sorry, say that again. I couldn't quite hear.
I would connect it to someone else, like someone I know.
Yeah. Okay, so if I said to you, you all have to write a 50-year-old man who's a professional who's got kids. Who would you connect it to? Say, for example.
My dad?
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, you probably change their first name, or add their second name so that they don't get offended. But I often base characters on real people, but I never base them entirely, and I never tell them I'm basing characters on them. And I think that's a really good way to write characters. It's not cheating. It's not cheating because you become really good judges of character. I mean, we call it characters because they have character. So your parents or your uncles or aunties, say, or your grandparents, they have strong character. And you are really good because you spend most of your life watching them going, why is Dad such a dick? Why does Mum get angry when we get to the light? Why does, when my siblings fight, why does this happen? So you know, parents and relatives are really good models for characters. I wrote a play where the two parents were very much based on my parents. And it was really interesting because I always thought I was really unlucky with my parents because they were so sort of boring. And people said to me, wow, I would love to have parents like that. And my parents saw it, and I made Dad quite selfish, and he never used to drive us to school. We always had to walk to school. Even when there was a storm, he'd say, a storm which sunk a ship. And he said, oh, you can walk, it's okay to walk. You know, and I fell over on the way to school because it was so windy and stuff. But Dad went, oh, no, it's good for you to walk. And I showed this in a play. And I showed Dad going, no, you can walk. And he never did anything, and he was sort of quite selfish. And after the play, he came to it, and someone said to him, what do you think? And he said, oh, it's not, he says, I'm not that nice. I'm not that nice. And he thought I'd made him out to be a real hero. And I thought I was making him out to be, you know, really nasty. So it's really good to look at real people, but usually if I create a character based on a real person, I might bring in other details from someone else. So it might be, a character might be based on my father, say, but then it might also be one of my teachers I had at school, and they might come in. So, but there's, I know, I mean, I made my whole career as a writer when I was at secondary school imitating the principal, and I did an assignment where I imitated the principal. We had to do an audio thing, but my teacher she loved it, but she couldn't show it to anyone because I'd get in trouble. So I got an A, but you know, she had to not show anyone or tell anyone about it. And so yeah, we imitate people, or we get inspired by people that are around us. And you learn to do it in a way that they don't get offended. I had to write a character, a boy racer. He was a 15-year-old. Well, he's 14 actually, and he wanted to be a boy racer, and he knew everything about cars there was to know about cars. And he was a spoiled brat, but he was a really good character, and I created the character. But I drive a Suzuki Swift, and I cycle. So a Suzuki Swift is the most un-boy racer car in the world. I can change oil, and I can change a tyre, and I can put in petrol, but that's it. I can't do anything. I wouldn't know what a cam belt was, or I have no idea. Someone says what's a cam belt? I'd say, is that cam belt the famous playwright? So I'm absolutely ignorant. So I wanted to create this 15-year-old boy that knew a lot about cars, and I rang up my niece, and she was about 16 at the time, and she was sort of like a girl racer. And I said, oh, Charlotte, if I wanted to put some sound equipment in my car, what would I? Oh, you get a subwoofer and audio. You maybe with a Mazda you could do that. And then she, I'd use an Evo for that. And she just knew everything there was. So I asked her all these questions about cars and about her friends and stuff and about her parents. And I created this 14-year-old boy based on a 16-year-old girl. And he was a really good character. Anyway, she came to the play, and I said, did you enjoy the play? oh yeah, it was cool. And oh great. And I said, what do you think of the boy? He was amazing. I really liked him. And it never occurred to her that it was her. So it's amazing how if you don't always have to give someone the same name or give them even the same gender, or the same age, but you can base them on real life situations. However, sometimes you don't know someone like that, especially if you're writing something said 100 years ago. What are other ways to create character? What are other ways besides connecting with someone you know? Any ideas what you'd do if you had to create a character?
When you're like, you've had a weird experience of some sort, you can like sort of base the character on how, like, almost like polar opposite to what you think. So you can do like polar opposites.
You brought up a really good thing. That theatre is often about surprise, and so if you go into a situation, say, and a school teacher says, you shouldn't do that. There's a rule against sneezing on a train. You go, oh yeah, typical school teacher, telling people what to do. And that's sort of predictable. Whereas if you go into a library and there's a cleaner there, and you go to get a book and the cleaner says, you know what, I don't think Crime and Punishment is as good a book as The Idiot. Dostoevsky is a great writer, but everyone thinks Crime and Punishment is his greatest book. But I think The Idiot's got much better, narrative flow. And you sit and go, I'm in a library, and the cleaner who's earning minimum wage knows more about authors than I do. That's an interesting situation. So we often have surprises in our life, or we meet surprising people, and that can really work in a play as long as the surprise is believable. So finding out that the cleaner has superpowers that flies at night, maybe not as interesting as finding out that the cleaner used to, making up an example from real life, used to design dams in China, but because they warned the government that the dam might burst, and it did, they got exiled, so they had to come to New Zealand, and because they didn't have any good English, they had to get a job as a cleaner. That becomes an entirely believable situation. So those little surprises in life can often make really interesting things for character. And that while we're on character, the other interesting thing, what happens to characters in a play? You tell me. You've seen plays. What happens?
They develop.
What's the most important thing?
Well, there's a problem, or there's some sort
Sorry, you've got to really speak up.
like
There's
there's a problem which makes them change, or like develop all the
absolutely.
time.
You've got it. You've nailed it. Change. If a character doesn't change, then it's a bit boring. If I write a play about 4 young people that live in a flat together, and there's a big rugby test on, they watch it then go to bed. That's not very interesting. That's sort of the worst play in the world. However, if I write about 4 people living in a flat together and one of them is a serial killer, that's quite interesting. Or 4 people living in a house together, and I don't know, it works out that the new flatmate used to be married to this person's best friend. Now we're getting interesting. And most characters change in a play. They don't have to change a lot, but they have to have some sort of crisis or some sort of challenge. And so what I do when I create characters is I work out who they are, but then I go, what do they want? What does your character want? And what's their beat? What do they want to get? What's their hurdle? And if you look at great plays, Romeo and Juliet, what do they want? Well, Romeo wants Juliet, and Juliet wants Romeo. What's the hurdle?
The wall.
The families, like the different families.
I haven't seen that version. I know what you mean. But yeah, the families hate each other, and so the families hate each other. So that's a really, and that's something we can relate to. That's something we can all relate to, whether we live in rural New Zealand or whether we live in London today, or whether their families hate each other. That's absolutely right. So they always have their challenges and their obstacles, and they have to overcome them. And the skill of the playwright is how you overcome your challenges and your obstacles. That's what's hard to do. And how the character changes. What do we call what sort of conflict when a character has? So let's say, and it's actually a great example, a character wants to go inside Buckingham Palace and meet the Queen, but they can't because there's a wall stopping them. What do we call that sort of conflict?
Physical conflict?
What's that?
A physical conflict?
Yeah, it is a physical conflict, and there's another word for it in terms of the character begins with E. Okay, external. So all characters have external conflict. So I want to go to the shop, but my mother won't let me. That's an external conflict. I want to get into the palace, but and a lot of external conflicts are fantastic. I want to go to the supermarket, but the government has said you've got to stay at home in self-isolation. That's an external conflict, even though I'm staying at home. But there's also a thing called an internal conflict. What do you think that is?
That'd be like emotional boundaries.
Yeah, give me an example.
You can't go somewhere because your ex-boyfriend's going to go there.
Yeah, that's and why aren't you going to go there? So why are you worried?
Well, because you don't want to make a fool of yourself, because you'll be in public and you'll start crying or something.
That's right. So your conflict is something that's inside you. No, that's a really good answer. It's something you don't want to do, and so they're often the conflicts that make for really good theatre. When a character, I'm a teacher, and I know I should punish you, but I also know that I've got a gambling problem. So I'm going to let you off in the hope that you won't tell on me. Stuff like that is really great stuff for a playwright. We love it when those things happen because they affect our character. The other word I love using when I'm teaching sort of like characters and stuff is status. Tell me what status is.
How much power they have.
Emily's saying how much power they have.
Yeah, how high someone is. So in a school, the principal has the highest status. In a supermarket, the boss has the highest status. The lowest status will be the people packing shelves and the cleaners. In a school, the lowest status people are the junior students, the youngest students. The highest status, as I said, is the principal. However, if I'm a principal of a school and I leave school in my suit and I get into the car and my wife said, "Did you remember to pick up the dog's food from the vet?" How has my status changed?
It's just gone down a bit.
Down a bit. Who's the high status character in the car?
Your wife.
That's right. Okay, so we all have high and low status parts of our life. If we're healthy, we do. If we're only ever high status, there's something wrong with us. And if we're only ever low status, there's something wrong with us. And I must say, I love being in situations where I'm different statuses. So I like talking to groups like you guys because you treat me well and you're nice and I'm high status. But I also like playing sport where I'm overweight, I'm slow and I'm old, and everyone else is quicker and better at it. But I enjoy it because they keep me honest, and so it's good being in different statuses. But it's also interesting when status changes, and if we talk about challenges to character, often these challenges reveal our character and strengthen our character. So a change in status, you go, and I gave you one. The principal walks into a cab. Can anyone think of a status change, a change in status that could happen to a character?
When you're in court, like staying up late or stealing or something.
I didn't quite hear that. You're in court?
When you're caught, like stealing something or staying up late or something by your mum.
Okay.
Principal.
So
What?
you
Oh, I thought it was like a different scenario. Oh, what's
Yeah, well, status change for that person. Yeah.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
okay, so you it can be very simple. Your parents say go to bed at this time, and then okay, and I will when I come home, and you're still up. Okay, your status is lowered. How can the status then change again in that situation?
Make up some really shitty excuse, and it works.
Right? Yep. Or they come home and they say you've got schools tomorrow, and you're responsible. You should go to bed. You should be studying for exams. And then you go, how did you guys get home? Oh, we drove home. Well, how come, Dad? How come I can smell alcohol in your breath? Oh, your mother drove. How come I can smell alcohol in her breath? Oh, we got Dyla Driver. I didn't hear anything. Look, it's okay to drink a little bit of alcohol. It's something like that. Suddenly, the child has become the moral watchdog. The child has caught out the parents as being hypocrites. I'll go to bed and we won't punish you for staying up late. Okay, so what happens is the dynamic changes because the kid has actually got the moral high ground.
It's that leverage over the higher, I guess, status that swaps it.
Leverage is a great word. Leverage is exactly right. So when characters know something, when characters, reveal something, so I'm criticizing one of you. I'm telling you off for being rude, and what's your name? And you tell me, and I go to myself, your family owns one of the biggest farms in the area, and I'm busy trying to sell machinery. I'll change my view. I'll go, this person that I'm high status over has actually got some leverage over me, so I'll treat them differently. And status happens everywhere. So status happens amongst a bunch of school students. It happens amongst road workers. It happens amongst unemployed people. It happens amongst billionaires. And what's interesting is the different sorts of status. So getting growled at by a teacher might be a low status thing in some schools, but in some environments that might be high status. And they often say one of the biggest things stopping some students doing well at school is to get praised by the teacher makes their status drop amongst their peers. So if I say, that's a wonderful answer, you're so clever, if your friends applaud politely, that's great. But if they go, wouldn't do, then you've lost status for answering the question. So you're not going to answer the question next time. So status is complicated. In places like prison, status gets really, the rule is if you narc, if you tell on someone, then your status goes way down. And so it's an interesting, if you're a certain sort of criminal, you have high status. If you're a certain sort of other criminal, you have very low status. So we all have morals. We all have moral views. Sometimes they can be quite twisted, but we all have them. And so I often find for a scene to work, the character must change, and in some way, and status must change. And the best scenes usually involve a change in status. So that's something I really concentrate on when I'm writing. How does the status of the character? I mean, on my first draft, I just write a story, but then I go, what's happening? Why is the scene not working? Because nothing changes. Why is the scene really good? Because characters reveal stuff that makes we find find out stuff about characters that's really interesting. Any questions so far? 'Cause you're answering
I have
my
a
questions
question.
really well.
So, do you, when you've written a play, or like midway through writing it, do you ever do an open script where you like read what you've got to other people to get like other people's feedback?
Very good question. Yeah, I do and I don't. What I like to do is to write a first draft. So I like to actually finish the play to be the story that I think it is. Because while I'm writing it, I don't want people telling me if it's any good or not. However, the minute I've written a first draft, I like to have a reading and have people tell me what they think. And actors are really good people because they're so selfish. All they care about is their own part usually. And they yellow out their part so they have to read it. And they don't even read the other stuff. But what's good about actors is they worry about their part. And so if you haven't written actors a good part, they'll tell you. And it's also good to hear dialogue because you can hear stuff that you don't hear when you write it. So I think when I used to write sketches, just one scene, I'd read it out. You know, I'd give it to it. We'd have a session once a week, and we'd all just listen to it. But I do caution about showing your work too early because you can convince yourself it's not very good. And I've often had people who've read an early script and said, "Oh, I don't like it. It's not very good." And I've improved it and rewritten it. So my advice would be get something down and then show it to people. And that gets us into the process of writing. I have a saying I use with students that make people get a bit surprised, and that's fast and bad. And what I mean by that is when you first write something, don't be too judgmental. Don't say, "Oh, I'm terrible. I've never written before. I can't do this." Just write it. And the worst thing to do is to lack confidence. And I like to think of it as having two people on your shoulder. And the person on your left shoulder is a really nice person who's encouraging. It's like the best drama teacher in the world, and also a really good friend who goes, "You're really talented. You know what? You've got great stories to tell. You should really write stuff." And then on your right shoulder, you've got this person that's also quite a nice person, but they're really picky, they're really finicky, they're really judgmental. And they go, "You might think your play's good, but it's 20 pages long and it should be only 15. And, your two main characters are good, but why is your third character so boring? And why don't you rewrite it again so that there's a bit more action?" So that person on your left shoulder, the encouraging person, is really helpful when you're writing a first draft. You need that person. And so you need that person to get you to go through to the end. And it doesn't matter if you make spelling mistakes. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to format. Just get the stuff down. But once you've done that, get that person on the right shoulder to go, "Okay, what's wrong with this? We know we got a good story, but how are we going to make this play better?" And some writers write a first draft that's almost the same as the last draft. Other writers like me, often our first drafts are way too long and a bit all over the place. And through gradual process, get it into shape. But part of being a writer is knowing how you work. So if someone says to me, "Oh, your first draft's a bit long," I never panic because all my first drafts are long. And if they say, "Oh, your play actually got better as we went through," well, that usually is what happens with me. So if my first draft's not great, don't panic, it'll get better. So we all have different ways of working. Good question though. Any other question? Yeah.
Yeah, so like how much detail do you put in the draft? Like, is it a full blocking and stuff as well, like put in the...
Oh yeah, that's another really good question. Okay, so if you read Romeo and Juliet, in the big scene between, I think, Tybalt and Romeo, I think it is, Shakespeare writes, "They fight."
Yeah.
Okay? And then he writes, "Tybalt dies." So he's not big on dramatic bit more expensive than that. But what I hate in plays is when people try to overwrite and do the director's job or do the costume person's job. So I would never write, Josh is a 16-year-old boy that wears a grey shirt and a white hoodie and an orange cap. I forget all that. I just write Josh is a 16-year-old studying at a local high school. And I don't block too much. I let the director do that. But if there's something really important, I do say so. So if a character goes, oh, morning, sir, you're looking very smart today. If the person saying that is actually taking the piss out of them and being sarcastic, I might write in brackets, sarcastic. And if there's a particular thing that's important, then I do write that detail. But my biggest criticism of scripts is that people go into too much detail. So 8 students are sitting around in a classroom. There are 6 photos on the wall, each with captions. There is a fluoro light in the background with the curtains slightly open. Unless that's important to the story, don't write it. I only write what's... But if it's something like Lizzie offers Brad a bit of her blanket, that's really important because all the students are going to go, whoa, those two are going to hook up. So if it's important to the plot, yes, I do mention detail, but most of the time I don't. But if you're in doubt, less detail is usually better. Having said that, showing rather than telling is good. So action, we love action on stage. We love when people run. We love when people fight. We love when physical stuff happens. So don't hesitate to write physical stuff if it's things like fights, things like chases are really good on stage if they're done the right way. Good question. Any other questions?
I think it might be quite nice if they just stand up for a minute, because they're on wooden benches that are like the most uncomfortable seats you can imagine. So we might just have a quick stretch. I would love to maybe hear from you about multi-rolling. Whether you would recommend that for a first attempt.
Multi-rolling?
Yeah, so playing multiple characters like a New Zealand, or whether that's actually really complex and you're better off to start with, single roles. Yeah, are you alright? If it's uncomfortable, I can get some pillows. I'm just aware those are really borrowed. Yeah. Or some people might be on the carpet.
I've done it for breakfast.
Yeah?
So 5 donuts.
We don't usually sit this long, and so that's why it's not purpose-built for sitting.
What do you mean? Like slowly go up. You do it. Go.
I think if anything, he's just covering it. It's really good.
Like that.
But it's not. We give him anything.
Yeah, some of you might actually say, oh, I've got this idea, but this is where I'm stuck. I'm looking at you, but you may very well end up doing script writing, especially with coronavirus, so don't discount it.
Will we, for year 12 for script writing, is our max 6 minutes?
That's the recommended time. If it is longer than that, it's not the end of the
So
world.
like, it can take 6 minutes.
I wouldn't do more than 10 though. You're doing the best section rather than the entirety. You can, for your directing, do a whole play. Alright guys, let's get back because I'm aware time is of the essence. So Kate, what I just asked Dave is, what about multi-rolling? Is that a recommendation when you're first starting out playwriting? And what are some of the complexities around multi-rolling?
Okay, that's a really good question. What I do before I start writing a play, and I mentioned it before, the first thing I go is it a play? And if it's a short story, or if it's a poem, or if it's a song, or if it's a movie, or if it's a TV show, I don't write it. So I write it if I think it's a play. The second thing I do is I go, how many characters? And as I said before, until 2 weeks ago, if you wrote a play in New Zealand with 6 characters, it would get done at a professional theatre. If you wrote a play with 18 characters, it would never get done at a professional theatre. So I've up until now wanted to write for professional theatres. So I've only written for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 characters. So, and I'll tell you a little bit about New Zealand, because Oscar and I, when we wrote New Zealand, we had no idea that it would get done professionally. So we said, let's not write a set because it's too expensive and we can't afford it. Let's not use it. Let's not have lights. So we don't prescribe any sets. And then we said let's just write it for 2 actors we know. And we also thought we'd only do it at school. So we said let's not make it too long. And we realised we had a rich number of cast members. We realised we wanted a whole Indian cricket team. We wanted a Pacific Island church. We wanted not only the parents of Peter, but also the parents of Ioane. So we said the best way to tell the story is to have 2 actors playing all the parts. And it also makes the actors look really good. What that meant is that we had a few restrictions. Because we made the decision to make only 2 actors, we could never have one character talking to another that was played by the same character. So, for example, Mrs. Burton and Mrs. Tapioca were played by different actors, so they could have a scene together. But Mr. Tapioca and Mrs. Tapioca couldn't have a scene together. So that put by making a decision to have multi-character and by only having 2 actors, that made us cut some things out. And so there's a scene where Ioane comes and asks to borrow the mini snooker set. That scene actually happened. We first wrote that scene to be Peter asking his mother if he could take the set down to his friend's place. And we realised that the actor would have to talk to himself. And so we changed the whole scene because it didn't work, and it made the scene better. So sometimes you sort of make your own luck. In terms of writing a play, there's 2 different things. There's the number of characters and the number of cast. And the number of, they don't have to be the same. But what's weird is when like every time you write a play, you create a universe. You can make up the rules. So you don't have to, you can do whatever you like. You can say, for example, in New Zealand, Peter talks to the audience, but Ioane never does. Now that's not because we forgot to write lines for Ioane, that's just because we made a decision that it's Peter's story and he's talking to the audience. So I made a really definite decision that Peter would speak to the audience and Ioane never would. And Oscar and I both agreed that it's his story and it was about his reaction to this family. So when you get a story, you often find out that you have logistical problems if you try and write certain characters. I saw a play the other day where the police, it was about a siege inside a cafe, and the police was played by an outside voice. So an actor didn't play them, it was just a recording. And I in a way, I felt the play, even though that was consistent, I felt the play lacked a bit because you could never see the character, and I wanted to, because this 5th voice was the character. If you're writing a play, you might have 2 people living in a flat. Maybe they're in self-isolation to make it topical, and the pizza delivery person comes, the Uber Eats person comes, the courier comes, knocks on the door, but they're not allowed to touch each other. The door-to-door religious person comes. If I was writing that play, I might write it for 3 people. The 2 people trapped in the house, and then 1 actor that plays all the different roles. Because it's either seems a waste to bring in an actor just to play one role like that, one person that knocks at the door. So you work out, I'm writing a play at the moment, and when I say I'm writing a play at the moment, I mean, I've started it and it will probably take me 15 years to finish. But it's about a kid who's part of a soccer team, his uncle, and they're played by two different actors, and then there's an actress who plays a whole lot of different characters. So the kid and the uncle tell the story, or the uncle narrates the story, the kid is central to the story, and then all the other characters, including other parents in the team, other kids in the team, the romantic interest of the uncle, authority figures, undertakers, it's all played by one character. So it's really just a matter of thinking about what your play is doing and the craft of it. And I think playwriting isn't a science, it's a craft. It's not even an art. Often good playwriting is practical. It's about getting people on and getting people off. And that's a difficult thing to do. You know, you've got to play. If a character goes, oh, is that the phone? And the phone goes, that's a really dumb reason for getting someone off the stage. Partly because most people have mobiles. Or if someone says, oh, I need to go to the toilet. That's sort of a stupid reason for someone going off stage. But if they go, did you leave the handbrake off the car? Or are you telling me there's 14 people out there that think I'm going to give them free food and you rush off stage? That's believable. You've created a situation. So the sort of craft of choosing your characters, choosing whether they're multi-character or not, and the craft of getting people in and off stage are really important. And the best way to learn it is read and watch plays. See how other people do it. See how Shakespeare does it. And the other craft thing too is your set, your location. I tend to write single sets. In one play I wrote about a motor camp, called The Motor Camp. There were two caravans, and the whole play happened in this one little motor camp. And the scene never changed. I wrote a play recently, which it was a political satire. The first scene, the first act, took place in a motel room. The second act took place in the Beehive. So that was quite a challenge for the set designer. But when I originally wrote the play, the first act took place in a motel room. The second act took place in the Beehive, and the third act took place in the Beehive. And the interval was between the second and third act. And the director said, it's really hard to do this show because the poor old audience are going to have to sit and wait for the set to change before the interval. And it's too early to have the interval after the first act. So what are you going to do about it? So I rewrote a new scene to happen after the first act. And then I made sure the interval happened when the scene changed. So things like that might seem details, but they're not. They're really important because when you come into writing longer plays, like a one-act play that some of you are going to write, it's called one act for a reason, and that's because usually in a one-act play, it's one setting, and things happen to characters that all happen in one setting, basically. And if you don't have a set, if you set your play on a bare stage, well, that's fine. You can then anything can happen. The spaceship can land on Mars, then it can land back on Earth. That's fine. But usually that sort of idea comes from the writer, not the director. So you've got to have a pretty good practical idea, notwithstanding like what I said before, don't overdo the detail, but you've got to have a pretty good idea of what the play is going to look like when you do it. And I'll give you an example. I'm writing a play at the moment, another one that'll take 15 years, about a bowling club, about 4 women that are part of a bowling force. And when we first talked about it, I thought I might actually do it on a real bowling club, and so the actors play bowl, you know, and they actually, and the audience moves from end to end and sits and watches them. That could be a good idea, but at the same time, I could just set a bowling club in a stage and they pretend to play bowl. And I haven't answered the question. I don't know what the answer is yet, but I'm still working with that one. But those sorts of questions are really good questions to ask yourself at the beginning of a process of writing a play. Where am I? What's my set? How many characters have I got? How many actors have I got? Is an actor going to play more than one character? Why? Is an actor only going to play one character? Are my characters going to speak to the audience? Are all my characters going to speak to the audience? And none of my characters are going to speak to the audience. So you have to create your rules. And the thing is, you can create any rules you like. You can have one of your characters not speaking English. You can have a character that never speaks. You can have characters who one character is played by 3 different people. But the important thing is, before you start, think about it. Because if it's inconsistent, the audience will go, oh, this is a bit weird. Why does the character played by different people? Why is the same character suddenly changed? Why does that person speak to the audience in the first half but not the second half? So all those questions you need to ask yourself, before you start or as you start. And then if you get to the end, check that you're still, was I right to make that character never speak to the audience? And you might go, oh, maybe they will. I've written something recently where a guy speaks to the audience at the very beginning and at the very end, but nowhere in between. And I think that'll work because I think it's a nice sort of it's a beginning and an end that just makes the audience feel good, but we don't need it in the middle. So yeah, that's my thing on multitasking. Any other questions on that, or anything else that has come to mind while I'm speaking?
Have you ever written a play and realised that it wouldn't be good for a play and to chuck on the screen, or would you just drop it?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it happens all the time. So I've written, I wrote a TV show years and years ago that was really popular. It was just a sketch within a TV show, and I turned it into a play. Actually, I turned it into a musical, and then it fell over mainly because the actors involved couldn't do it. And what I learned from that is, I actually still think it would make a really good musical. But what I learned from that is that TV doesn't make good theatre. So I had to change it a lot to turn it into a musical. The other way round, I've got an idea at the moment, and I think it's a really good idea for a play. It's about a murder. It's a murder that happened in New Zealand. And I also think it would make a good TV show, but I'd have to do it totally differently. So if I did the play would all be told through the eyes of the mother of the murder victim. So you'd meet the mother, and she would play all the characters and tell the story. However, if it was done as a TV show, it would be done as a dramatised drama, documentary. So you would meet the murderers, you'd meet the victim, you'd meet the mother, you'd meet everyone. You'd see the inquest, you'd see the murder trial. So it depends. Yeah, what you can't do is just get a play and turn it and put it onto a TV screen. But yeah, there are ideas that don't really suit the theatre very well, and you've either got to sometimes you have to say, oh look, this is a movie. I suppose an experience I had recently was people said to me, can you turn the play into a movie? And I did, and I realised that because it was a play, it was too static, and so there wasn't enough movement for a movie. So we created a third act. We created a story at the end which involved a guy trying to drive a motorbike and motorboat, getting into trouble, nearly drowning, catching a fish, and we had a sort of a action climax. If you watch movies a lot of them have a big lot of action at the end, and it's not emotional action. It's not I'm going to leave you. Oh no, you can't leave me. What about the kids? It's not that sort of. It's actually a chase or an action climax, and so yeah. So no, I've never abandoned a play and turned it into television, but I have tried to adapt plays to TV or film with varying degrees of success. But I think I'm experienced enough now that I wouldn't write something that was impossible to put on as a play. So I wouldn't write that play that has 17 characters. Although, funnily enough, I'll go back to New Zealand because there's another story. When we wrote New Zealand, it was for 2 actors. Then suddenly every school in the country seemed to want to have it. And the reason they liked it is because there were so many characters that could be done by a drama club. And so New Zealand's been done more by classes than it's been done by 2 people. So I'm actually, another play I'm going to write by the time you guys are all 50, is a play that is for a class. It's performed by a class and it's about a class. And so it will have about 18 characters or 16 characters. And I'm not writing it for professional theatre, I'm writing it specifically for schools. So yeah, and there's not, as you probably know, there's not a lot of plays, New Zealand plays for schools. So I think that'll be a really interesting project when I get around to it.
Do you ever have...
Good question. Any others?
So do you ever have sort of tried and tested things when it comes to action-based? Because this is kind of a through line that you're mentioning a lot. Things that have flopped in terms of stage actions and things where you say that's your go-to. These are good stage actions to have.
Yeah. There's a Motor Camp, which was a very successful play. The guy that sort of wrote the original story and I, we thought the funniest thing in the world was this guy trying to pitch a tent and it falling down. And it's actually an incredibly hard thing to do on stage, and it usually didn't work very well. And so when we just thought, oh, it was so funny. But then there was another bit which involved a couple having sex in a caravan, and the caravan would jig up and down, but you wouldn't see anything. And I'm sorry, but it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen on stage, because it was just this couple would go inside and the other couple would be trying to do they'd have an argument or try and do the crossword, and this caravan would just start jigging up and down, and I just found it very funny. That's because I've got the sense of humour of a 12-year-old. But what works on stage, the only way you find out is by doing it. And so, we were just so convinced that trying to pitch a tent on stage would be funny, and it actually wasn't. And yet other things take you by surprise. And audiences tell you what they like. So I wrote a play where a French man has to show a Kiwi bloke how to be romantic. And it sounds sort of a bit old-fashioned. It was really funny. It was really funny because we all love seduction. We all love stories of romance. We all love people trying to fall in love with each other. And so even though it was sort of what I would call old-fashioned, it was funny. And so, you tend to test things on stage, and a lot of the time things I don't expect to be funny or dramatic are really good, and things that I think will be fantastic aren't that good. Sometimes it depends on the actors and the directors, but sometimes it's just... and that's what I'd warn you all about listening to people like me, or teachers or anyone, is that, yes, we can help you, we can give you advice, but a lot of the time you've just got to ignore what people say and do it yourself and see if it works for you. Because often people have given me advice with the best intent, and then I've found out that if I've ignored their advice, it's actually better. And I'm not saying don't listen to teachers or don't listen to experts. I'm just saying it's up to you to work out what works for you. And I remember someone said to me, I had a character, a guy hit his stepson, and it was a really amazing moment in the play because it was a comedy, and then suddenly this guy got really angry and hit his stepson. And someone from a theatre said to me, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because it's illegal to hit people in New Zealand, you know." And I said, "Yeah, but this is a play, and this is what happens in real life. We might have a law against it, but you know." And she said, "I cringed when I read that. I cringed when I saw that the father would hit the son." And so rather than take her advice, I put that into the script. And one of the characters said to this father, "Do you know that it's illegal to hit your child in New Zealand?" He said, "I don't care what you think. You know, tell Helen Clark to call in the UN. I've hit my kid." And then she said, "I cringed when you did that." You know, so being criticised actually helped me write the play better. And so, you know, be careful of people telling you can't do something on stage, because often they're just giving you the challenge. So if someone says you can't have two people, one on Mars, one on Saturn, well, maybe you can. You've got to think of the way to do it. So yeah. And like I said before, writing is a three-dimensional activity. It's not something you do sitting at a computer. And so I'll often write a play in a room with 6 other actors while I'm talking. And then I'll go, "Oh, okay, I know what's wrong now." And then I'll go home and rewrite it. But the real writing has happened in the room, not in my computer room. That's just what I do afterwards. So the real guts of a play often comes from talking to people, watching actors. It doesn't come from, no one is imaginative enough, in my opinion, to write it all in your head. You need help from your actors and from other people. I hope that's helpful. Any other questions?
What about adapting it from a book?
I didn't hear that.
What about have you ever adapted anything from a book?
Oh, great question. Yes, I have. I've had great time adapting. I adapted Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol stage.
Oh, nice.
And you probably know that, Scrooge, the story of Scrooge, and I really loved it. I set it in a modern business, so it gave me the chance to say things. And so Scrooge was not a man with a top hat and a beard and wearing a nightgown. He was a top business executive who wouldn't give his workers the day off for Christmas. And it became, and so it was and Bob Cratchit wasn't a guy that wore Victorian costumes and lit a fire. He was I think he was a courier or he was a sales assistant. And so that gave me a great chance to sort of, I think when you first write, it's quite hard to come up with a plot that works. Writing plots is really hard. So for me, adapting work was good because the story was already done. So I just had to work on character and dialogue. And so Scrooge, Christmas Carol was really fun. And it also taught me another thing, and that's that people will tell you that drama is about conflict and that you must have a lot of conflict. And there's a lot of conflict in the Christmas Carol. But it was also great when I wrote the Christmas dinner scene in Christmas Carol. They have the poor family get a goose for Christmas. It's the tiniest goose you could ever buy, but they think it's magical because they're a poor family. And even though there's no conflict in that scene, it's one of the loveliest scenes I think I've seen on stage of the stuff I've written, and actually Dickens wrote it. But sometimes we love seeing people having fun. So yes, we like conflict, but sometimes if you think of a TV show you like, sometimes you just like your 4 favourite characters all having fun together. So even though drama is about conflict, not everything has to be tense and dramatic. Sometimes a scene of people just enjoying themselves, I wouldn't want a whole play like that, but a scene where people have a really good time or where families have a good time is really good. And I think The Simpsons is a good example of that. Sometimes The Simpsons just are a really cool family and they do something together. And even though Bart's not very good at school, and even though Lisa's, too good to be true sometimes, and even though Homer's an idiot, we like the Simpsons, and we'd like them to be our neighbours. So writing scenes or characters that we like, I think are really important. In terms of adaptation, I also I've adapted 2 children's stories, one by Margaret Mahy called The Singing Buskew, and another by a guy called William Taylor, Nitwits. And that was great, taking a kid's story. Kids' stories tend to be quite short, so you end up writing quite a lot of dialogue, and it's a good practice. Adaptation is a really good thing to do. And then the last show I adapted was a Samoan novel about a girl growing up in Samoa, a 16-year-old girl growing up. And it was weird because I'm not Samoan and I'm not a 16-year-old girl. And I got in touch with a novelist called Sia Figel and said, you don't know me, and I'm probably the last person in the world who you'd think would want to adapt your book, but can I? And she was really great. And she said, you've worked with people I know, and if you're interested in the story had been written about 20 years ago, and no one had decided to adapt it. So I adapted it, and it was very successful. And it was really good for me because even though I'm not a Pacific Islander, it gave me a real insight into how Pacific society works. And the best version of the show got directed and all performed by a Pacific Island audience, by Pacific Island director and cast. They loved having a writer sort of who'd turned the novel into a book, into a play, but I loved having them sort of take it. They took it and ran with it, and we ended up doing it overseas actually. So it was a really good experience for me. So yeah, I really recommend adaptation as a good way to learn how to write. It's a great learning thing, but it's also good in its own right. And if you've got a story you love and you can imagine it being on stage, then go for it. I think it's a really good. Eventually, though, I found I'd rather write a story myself than write someone else's, but there's room for both. That's a good question. Any other questions?
Can I just quickly ask, you're known for your humour in a lot of your plays, so that seems to be quite a distinctive feature. Would there be any tips and warnings? Because we've got a lot of people in this class who enjoy kind of that quirky humour or black humour. So what would be your advice in writing with humour in mind?
Okay. It's really weird, because I hate people thinking I'm a comedy writer because I don't feel funny a lot of the time. And the thing I find really hard is to be funny when people want you to be funny.
Yeah.
So I write a column in the newspaper every week, and some weeks something happens. Someone is so stupid, a politician says something so dumb that I just go, oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to be funny. And so, but other weeks I just don't feel funny, so I write something serious. And so I suppose the first question is, if you have to work at it, if you feel that you're not really that funny, but there's a pressure to be funny, you don't even go there. If you're a serious person or if you're introverted and you don't think you're funny, then don't feel you have to be funny on stage. However, if you do have a quirky sense of humour, it's a very hard thing to teach. I'd say impossible. So really, it's just a matter of letting the humour come out. The big thing I think now with a lot of comedy is people can get offended by what I've written things that have offended people. I've written things that perhaps I wouldn't write today. But you've got to trust yourself, because humour, like a joke happens, and everyone laughs, and then they tell you why it's not funny. But if they laughed, it was funny. So we used to have a thing called gag fatigue, and what that was is you'd write a funny joke, and the actors would laugh at the read-through. They go, "That's a funny joke. That's great," and then they'd work on it, and they'd rehearse it, and they'd get sick of your funny joke because they've been working for 3 weeks on your play, and they don't ever want to hear that joke again. So they change it, and they ruin the joke because they forget that the first time they ever heard it, they laughed. And so audiences only hear a joke once. They don't hear it 28 times like an actor does. So you've got to have confidence. If everyone laughs the first time they hear it, then that's a good sign. And this is going to sound really egotistical, but it's a true story. When I sit in this office writing, if I write a funny joke, I laugh because it's the first time I've heard it. And if it's a really good joke, I laugh out loud. I come down to get a coffee and my wife goes, "Oh, aren't we being funny today?" But if you can't laugh at your joke, no one else will. And someone asked Woody Allen about jokes, and he said, "Of course I laugh at my jokes when I write them because it's the first time I've ever heard them." And so, and it's also important having friends or co-writers or classmates who are good audiences. I've had experiences of saying something that I think is a really funny joke and no one's laughed because they're too cool or too fashionable. And then I've done the same joke in a play and the audience roars with laughter. But comedy is also a craft. Now, being funny isn't a craft. And I've met, I hop on a bus, there's 5 people funnier than me. And there's only 6 of us in the bus. But it's not, and we've all got a mate that's funnier than us. We all know someone who's funnier than us. But being funny on stage, it is partly a craft. It's how you make a joke work. It's how you reveal stuff. It's what lines you give. Even technical things like putting the funny line. If you put the funny word in the middle of a sentence, the audience starts laughing. They don't hear the rest of the joke. But if you put it at the end, then they laugh and it gives the actor a pause. So there's sort of like technical things that will work. And the only way to learn those really is just to watch it. A lot of actors aren't very good at comedy because being good at comedy is often technical. It's not only about being funny. It's being able to deliver a line properly and being able to be heard, having good diction, and knowing to wait for a laugh so that your line doesn't get in the way. So there's a saying, anyone can write a tragedy, but comedy is really hard. I like that line because I've written comedy. And comedy is really difficult. But like I say, the biggest thing is to trust your own sense of humour. And the other thing too is that we have lots of different comedies in New Zealand, lots of different comedy styles. So some comics have a very laconic style, and they don't go for what I would call gags. You laugh at them because of their seriousness. A good example of that might be something like Wellington Paranormal, where O'Leary and what's his name, Minogue, they never laugh. They never say funny things, but you laugh at their seriousness. And yet we have other more gaggy sort of comics who look at, who where the joke is, I suppose, who are less subtle. But look, there's room for everyone. But yeah, I make jokes about things like I think I might have said it before. I heard someone in the pub, say, "Oh, I told you just before. My son's coming home because he's flatting with 2 travel agents," and I found that funny. I just thought the father was worried more about his son getting in the way of him being home than 2 people losing their jobs. And so, for me, nothing is sacred, and I do make jokes, perhaps that I shouldn't, that offend people. But as I once said, the most offensive thing in the world to me is boredom. So I don't get as easily offended. I don't go out of my way to offend people, though. I don't think it's funny to just offend people for the sake of it. But I tend to like humour that makes people wince sometimes as well as laugh, and to go, "Oh, New Zealand is a bit like that, isn't it?" And I can't necessarily think of it. Well, I'll give you a good example, actually. When I wrote The Motor Camp, it was done in Christchurch less than a year after the earthquake. And everyone in Wellington said, you can't refer to the Christchurch earthquake. It was a terrible thing. And, you know, people died. You can't make jokes about the Christchurch earthquake. I talked to the director, and he says, you know what? I think people in Christchurch are getting back up on their feet. They're going to play. I reckon it'd be quite good to mention it. And so this guy says to a family, where are you from? And they go, Christchurch. And he's not from Christchurch. And his whole family just hugs him and go, oh, you people are so resilient. Oh, good on you know. And everyone laughs because these people from Christchurch had a whole year of people telling them how sorry they were for them and how resilient they were. And so we took the piss out of that, and the audience laughed because they said, yeah, we're sick of that. And then the guy went, earthquake, and everyone jumped into the caravan and did. And again, the audience laughed at that because he was playing a joke on the poor old people from Christchurch. And then about 4 weeks later, someone said to me, do you know what one of our audience said? And I said, what? And he said, the guy said, oh, I'm going to invite some people to go to that earthquake play. And just because we added 4 lines about the Christchurch earthquake, they thought the whole play was about it. So, but you have to take risks. I also remember writing a line in a play that referred to local events about someone who'd just been fired from their job, and the whole audience went, oh, like you can't say that. So I cut the line. And I wrote another line in a play, and my wife she's a producer, so she reads most of what I write. She hadn't read that joke, and she was so offended by the joke, she punched me during the opening night. She said, you can't say that. She punched me in the shoulder, and I went, ow! And it was funny because she never heard the joke, and she got offended by it, but the audience liked it, so I kept it in. But, yeah, humour, no one who's trying to be funny will hit the spot 100% of the time. And I quite often write a joke, it doesn't get a good laugh in the play, so I cut it. And other times, people tell me no one will laugh, and they do laugh, so I keep it in.
Have you got any final questions? I think these guys have done amazingly considering the seating arrangements here, and well done for speaking just off the cuff with so many examples. In terms of where to next, are we still alright to say in 2 weeks' time or so, possibly students submit part or some of the script that they're struggling with? Yeah.
No, I think that's a great idea. So, yeah, I'm happy to read them. So if you email them, and then I'm happy to sort of give feedback, and it'll be great because they'll know what I'm talking about. And maybe even if some of them could read out. But
yeah. If they're ready, I think 1 or 2 people may be ready for a stand-up reading, and then we'll just record it. If that's,
And that'd be great. And I suppose really, you know, fast is bad, as I said. Just the thing to do is to get out there and write. Have some idea of where you're going, but see what happens.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a lot of the process is refining and cutting stuff down and rewriting. You know, I think that's a really valuable process. So that I'd recommend that sort of approach because that's how plays get written. And for those doing more than one scene, just start with the scene they want to. I often go, what are the scenes I want to write? So I look at an issue and I go, are there scenes I want to write, and are there scenes that will happen but I don't want to write them? So, for example, there's a play, Glengarry Glen Ross by David Mamet, and halfway through a building burns down. But that doesn't actually happen in the play, but it happens between scenes, if you like. So sometimes if you have to write lots of scenes, it's good to go, what has anything happened between these 2 scenes? And sometimes big things can happen off stage, and it adds to the plot, but we don't need to see it. So I always go, write the scenes you want to see happen. So is a couple in a flat, and the pizza guy turns up, but they think that he's a Jehovah's Witness. To me, that could be an interesting scene. I'd like to see that scene. But if a the courier turns up but he's got the wrong house number, that's not, to me, I'm not sure that's such a great scene. So if a scene, if a beat to the story, if a bit of the story has to happen but it doesn't happen on stage, that's fine. But the writer's got to know that.
All right, Dave, thank you so much. I reckon
Well, thank
that's
you.
been really
I
helpful.
hope that's helpful.
Right, we'll see you soon. All right.
Okay.
Bye for now.
See you
Bye.
later. Bye.
Cheers.
Oh, what a